How many of you would like to have a skunk for a pet? Now, a lot of you probably said, "Pee, ew, a skunk." Well, you wouldn't want one perhaps because, well, they're kind of stinky. Well, this is a story about a skunk whose nickname just happened to be, you guessed it, Stinky. Stinky was a very nice, friendly skunk. He liked to play with all the other animals, but the only problem was whenever he would come out to play, well, it would go something like this.
"Stinky, Stinky, go away. We don't want you here to play."
Now, do you think that would hurt his feelings? Well, of course it did. And his tail would flop down between his legs, his ears would flop down on the side of his head, his lip would poke out, and he'd walk away, all sad. This happened to poor Stinky every day until one day, out of the forest came a big, huge bobcat. That bobcat walked right over to those animals where they were playing. He walked up and stuck his face right up there next to the rabbit and said, "Tomorrow, when I get hungry, I'm coming back to eat you." Then he walked right over to where the squirrel stood shaking in its furry little feet, and he said, "And when I finish the rabbit, I'm going to eat you." Then he went over to the little bitty chipmunk who was sitting there going, "Oh!" And he said, "And I'm going to have you for dessert." As he turned to leave, he looked back and he said, "Don't forget, I'll be back tomorrow." Needless to say, the animals were very frightened, and they were standing there going, "Oh, we're going to die." They were so upset they didn't even notice when Stinky came walking up. And Stinky said, "What's the matter, guys?" "What's the matter? What's the matter? We're going to be eaten by the big old huge bobcat, and you don't have to worry. Nobody ever eats a skunk." "That's true. Have you ever seen anybody drive up to McDonald's and say, 'I'd like a skunk McBurger, please'?" Well, of course not. Stinky thought a moment, and then he said, "Well, I guess then perhaps it's not so bad being a skunk. At least smelling like one." But who would want to smell like a skunk?" Perhaps not you, you say, but consider the options. You could smell like a skunk or be in the belly of a bobcat. Not much of a choice, right? Well, those animals lined up in a line, and Stinky came by, and he, psh, 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 and oh, did they smell. But the next day, when that big old bobcat came out of the woods, and he looked at those animals, they were shivering in their little furry feet, and he was rubbing his paws together and saying, "Oh boy, I'm ready to have me some food." He started moving closer, and "I think I'll have me some nice, juicy nice.
"Oh my gosh, what a stinky rabbit!"
But that's okay. I actually prefer squirrel. I love nice juice. Nice juice. Nice.
"Oh my gosh, what a stinky squirrel!"
But hey, don't you sometimes like to eat dessert first? Well, sure you do. And well, bobcats are exactly the same way. He said, "I'm going to have me a nice, sweet, juicy little,
"Oh my gosh, what a stinky chipmunk!" "Oh man, how can anything so little smell so bad? You guys are a bunch of stinkies!"
And he turned around, he ran off, and he never came back again. One would hardly have to ask the question, were the animals happy? Well, of course they were happy. Their lives had been saved. And who had saved them? Why, Stinky, of course. They were very grateful, and while they smelled, they didn't even notice that Stinky smelled. They played with him, and they became very good friends. But you see, there was a problem. When they went down to the river and took a bath, eventually, well, they didn't smell anymore. But guess who still did? Why, Stinky, of course. And now what were the animals going to do? Stinky had saved their lives. They wanted to be his friend, but they just couldn't stand the way he smelled. But then the chipmunk, who was very bright for her size, came up with an idea. She went over to the farmer's house and she got 3 clothespins. She came back, she clipped one on the rabbit's nose, clipped one on the squirrel's nose, clipped one on her own nose, and then they marched right straight over to Stinky's house. I need you to help me with this part of the story. Take your fingers,
Clap them over your nose and repeat after me. Stinky, Stinky, come out and play. We promise we won't run away.
Okay, let's try it again.
Stinky, Stinky, come out and play. We promise we won't run away.
Stinky did come out to play, and it was the most incredible thing. Those animals soon found out that Stinky was one of the best players in the whole forest. He could run faster, he could jump higher, he could kick a soccer ball further, he could do almost anything just great. Now, guess who was the first to be picked whenever they were picking teams? Why, Stinky, of course. The animals learned a very important lesson that day. You see, had they let the difference between them and Stinky keep them from getting to have him as a friend, while not only would they have not had a friend, but they wouldn't have had a really good playing partner. I think the best way to finish this story would be to have you answer some questions for me. So let's move on to that part.